Hey there, and welcome back to the episode of the B2B Marketing Asia podcast. I'm your host, Joe Escobedo. Joining me today is Glenn Van Zutphen, who is the founder of VanMedia Group. And thanks for being on the show, Glenn.
Joe, always a pleasure to talk with you and to be with your great fans out in YouTube land.
So, Glenn is the real deal when it comes to communications. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to have him on the show today to talk about how to be a more concise communicator. Glenn, I know you have your three C's, but what's your general advice? A lot of people struggle to get to the point like I am now. So, what are your advice for folks like that?
Two things come to mind. First is your verbal content, right? What you're going to say to people, to your audiences, your stakeholders, whoever they are. Second is your physical presentation, eye contact, hand gestures, body movement, etc. And we know in the virtual world in which we all live, a lot of that body language impact has changed from being in person on stages in front of three or 400 people at a convention center to now being in the tiny screen here online. And sometimes if people are watching on their phones, it's even a smaller screen versus a desktop. So we have to think about those messages you're going to give and how you're going to do it. First of all, when we think about your messages, right? First and foremost, you probably have an idea of what you want to say or what you want to talk about. Maybe you have a product or a service or an event that's coming up that you want to get the word out on, whatever it is. But the first thing you have to think about is the audience that you're trying to reach. Let me say that again because it's so important. The first thing you have to think about is the audience you're trying to reach. What are their needs? What are their concerns? What are their pain points around possibly whatever it is you have to say? Is there culture involved that you need to take into account as you're presenting this information? We live across Asia, of course, many different cultures, many different religions, beliefs, levels of understanding about rank and social norms. So we as speakers need to take all of this into account. All right. So you've got that audience firmly in mind. Then you have to reconstruct the information that you are going to give to that audience to make sure that it is something they want to hear, not just something that you want to push on them. So, for example, Joe, you're doing a series of videos on marketing and how to be successful, and you have a idea of the program you have and all the great coaching you do with companies, with individuals, and that you could easily just push that. But if you turn that around, which I know you often do, you think about, okay, what's the pain point of the client? What do they need from me? What do they care about when it comes to any kind of marketing information? Now, one pain point might be cost, right? Can they afford you? Which of course they can, and they're silly not to pay you if they're even thinking about that because it's pennies on the dollar for the value that you give. But so it could be that, could be time. Do they have enough time to help do all this marketing stuff, whatever it is that you're going to recommend to them? And third, what will be the benefit? What will be the gain that they will get? So many times as a speaker,
And so, yes, definitely think about what your audience is. What are some of their pain points you talked about? And also, what's going to be interesting to them? Because one of those things where it could be super boring to you, for example, but they may find it super fascinating. And I think this is one of the common things in B2B where a lot of people consider cybersecurity or cloud computing boring as a topic, but the people who are in it on a day to day basis, they actually are quite fascinated by it. So that was something that I realized at a conference as well too, is that the content is really subjective to the person viewing it. What's interesting to you may be not interesting to the other person and vice versa.
while we're still on the topic before we move on to something else. 2019, probably about 2 years ago, right before all the pandemic madness happened and we were all traveling and consulting and coaching and all that. I was up in KL. I'm based in Singapore, up in KL with a major international credit card. It's one that you all probably either have or know about. I'm not going to divulge names, but I was talking with the general manager of the office in KL, and their function there is mostly as a call center across Asia and across the world. So they've got 300 people in this office, many of whom are call center folks. All right. So we know that's a thankless job anyway. And this particular company, they do it very well, but they were coming up to their December end of year town hall meeting. And like I say, it was in September or so that I was working with this coach, October maybe, and we were talking about that upcoming event that he was getting ready and prepping for. And there were three issues that he really had to talk about that were on the table, right? One was a new outreach to their customers when they called in, something that was going to be of great value to the credit card company that he really wanted the the call center folks to talk about and sell them in a certain way on that, sell the customers on that. So it was going to mean a little bit more work. Everybody had to get trained up on this new information, and it was going to be a new line of pushing information to the audience, et cetera. You get the idea. Secondly, in the town hall meeting, there were a couple of personal issues that were important to the audience. One was, oh, so he was excited to get in there because this new initiative was going to be really exciting for the company, for the customers. It was going to give them great value. But quite honestly, it was going to mean a little more work for the rank and file guys on the phone from the company. And it wasn't, they weren't going to get paid anymore for it. And so I explored this with him. I said, okay, well, fair enough. You got to talk about that. What else is going on in the office? And that particular topic was going to be the main focus of his town hall meeting at the end of the year. He said, well, we've got some new policies around how to apply for vacation to take time off in the new year 2020, as it turned out last year. And then also one of the ongoing issues is because we have so many folks in here all hours of the day, our coffee machine is always breaking down in the break room. And everybody wants coffee, tea, or their tiaria or whatever it is. And it's constantly breaking down. So they got to do sachets of 3-in-1 or whatever. And so I said, well, are you going to talk about those things? He said, I don't know. We can just handle that in a memo or whatever. Okay. Long story short, after we discussed this for about 15, 20 minutes, he came to the realization that, you know what, he should probably address those two topics first, because those two topics are the ones that people in the office really care about. Coffee. We all care about our hot beverages, whatever they may be. And secondly, how we're going to be able to apply for our time off. A long way back, a third, distant third would be this new effort to reach out to the customers. So fast forward, he did the event. It was in December of 2019. And then we did a follow-up call after that. And I asked him how it went. He goes, wow, he goes, it was amazing. He goes, I led off with, we're fixing the coffee machine. We're getting a new one in here. He made positive steps to make that happen. In fact, they added a second one to make sure that there was always a redundant system for them. And then he goes, we talked about fully through the staff ability to sign up for their holiday in the new year. They were very pleased with the system we devised. We put some thought into that. And then third, we talked about this new effort to reach out to the customers. So he did exactly what we're talking about. He took that idea of what's important to his audience, in this case, his town hall folks, 300 people in his office, what's important to them, and lead with that. You can't always get away with giving bad news to people or news that hurts in some way, but you can surely frame things in a way that will be more pleasing, engaging, memorable to your audiences.
Absolutely. So I love this example. And I don't think, once again, enough leaders really do that because we're so much in our own shoes and looking at it from our own point of view that we say, okay, this is what we want to accomplish. This is what we want to do. And I think that it doesn't really work all the time. But I think another good advantage of that is getting buy-in. So for example, if you're pitching the CEO and you're a marketer and you're talking about demand generation and clicks and engagement, he's going to have no idea, he or she's going to have no idea what you're talking about. And if you try to frame it in that way, they're going to be totally confused and probably going to reject your marketing initiative. But if you look at it in terms of, okay, how is this going to increase our cost efficiencies? How's it going to help us generate revenue, develop a more healthy cash flow? Then you might pique their interest. They might want to find out a bit more. So I think that is some really, really good advice there, Glenn.
It is, it's really challenging. As you rightly point out, executives are busy. The professional marcoms and communications folks in offices are busy. Everyone's got a lot going on. So oftentimes it comes down to a push message. Hey, we got a press release. Hey, we got a new initiative. We've got a new product. We've got a new whatever. And hey, let's push out that press release. I can't tell you how many of those I get a week. As you remember, Joe, you've been on my show. I have a radio show on Money FM every weekend, 89.3 FM here in Singapore. And I get a gazillion pitches every day. And it usually starts out with dear editor, something generic, anonymous. And then they just blather on pushing what it is they want to know, not once thinking about my audience, which is 30 to 60-year-old senior executives, Singaporeans, non-Singaporeans, men, women. What do they want to hear? And the successful pitches that come to me are the PR and Marcoms people who send a pitch to me that says, Dear Glenn, This is what I think would be interesting for your audience, specifically points 1 through 6 or whatever. Can we talk more about that? This is how our product, our service is going to help them. When they approach me as a journalist and radio show host to talk to me that way, they get my attention. I tell you, many of the other people, I just see the headline, the header, delete. I don't even look at it because I don't have enough time because they haven't done their job in thinking about that. Now, that's on the external media engagement front. And maybe many of your watchers of this video aren't necessarily involved in that. But just to circle back to what you initially asked about people being nervous, presenting information, if you get that first element correct, the first element of knowing your audience, who you want to speak to, and what they want to hear in relation to your topic, that immediately takes away a lot of the pressure, a lot of the nervousness that a lot of people who are giving talks, presenting, panelists, whatever, it takes away a lot of that trepidation that they have because they know what to talk about and they know what's going to be interesting to that audience.
But I think that same advice goes to the B2B sales folks as well too. So we're working on a project right now. And one thing we're trying to move away from is basically what you just talked about. So these generic kind of messages that you obviously haven't done any research into the company. You're just trying to push your product or services down someone's throat. And obviously, as Glenn rightly pointed out, you are just going to probably delete it. You're going to block them or whatever it is, but you're probably not going to reply to their message. So I think this is some super practical tips, Glenn, that you've shared with us today. I have found it super fascinating, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you so much for watching and listening to today's episode. Really appreciate it, your support. Take care, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Jim.